Hello and welcome to the final day of the 5th International Vatican Conference. We hope you enjoyed yesterday's closing discussion about the relationship between the mind, body, and soul. Please remember, if you missed this session or any others, they can be accessed on our platform and viewed on demand. Finally, we welcome you to share highlights of the Vatican Conference with the world on social media. You can help us by citing @CuraFDN and the hashtags Unite to Prevent and Unite to Cure. To open the day, please welcome Monsignor Tomás Trafny, Head of Science and Faith Department, Pontifical Council for Culture, and General Secretary, Science and Faith, STOQ Foundation.
We hope you are enjoying the conference. The third day of our conference will focus on a number of interesting topics. We live on a special planet capable of sustaining life. Moreover, it is a place where different forms of life coexist in different ecosystems, influencing life and survival of each other. Healthy ecosystems mean better and healthier life. So that's why taking care of our planet is mandatory for us and for generations to come. A growing awareness about pollution and ecological emergencies raises an important question about our identity. Are we stewards entrusted with the noble duty to take care of the place we live? Or are we owners with a huge sense of superiority? In such a context, it is important to reflect what does it mean to be human and how the virtue of humility postulated by all religions can help us to shape ourselves with greater attention to others, regardless religion, race, or nationality. There is no doubt that over the centuries, the gift of rationality led human beings to the point of dominance, through technological advancements, for example. More and more, the same gift is rediscovered as a mission towards serving others. This is the deepest meaning of true culture, which aims to help us to be more human. And for this exact reason, the gift of rationality should be expressed together with the attitude of generosity and selflessness. Only by uniting those three characteristics, we can understand better what does it mean to be human. A unique earthly creature, but capable to look into heaven, to search for infinity, and to reach communion with God. To hear more about this, I would now like to introduce His Eminence Cardinal Pietro Parolin. We are honored to have the Secretary of State of the Vatican with us for the 5th International Vatican Conference. Your Eminence, the floor is yours.
Eminenza Reverendissima Cardinal Gianfranco Ravasi, Presidente del Pontificio Consiglio della Cultura, egregio Dottor Renato Poletti, Presidente della Fondazione Scienza e Fede STOQ. Sono lieto di rivolgere un cordiale saluto a tutti i partecipanti a questo convegno, organizzato dal Pontificio Consiglio della Cultura insieme con la Cura Foundation e la Fondazione Vaticana Scienza e Fede STOQ. Nell'arco della giornata affronterete temi che potrebbero sembrare tra loro distanti: l'ecologia, l'economia, le tecnologie impiegate nella salvaguardia della salute, la filantropia e l'altruismo. Ciò che li unisce è il riferimento alla persona umana. Infatti, un'importante questione che emerge dal vostro programma è quella sulla quale l'umanità non cessa di indagare da secoli, perché riguarda la nostra identità proprio come esseri umani. Anche oggi rimane sempre attuale la domanda: chi siamo noi? Nel corso dei millenni siamo stati in grado di progredire al punto di sviluppare molteplici culture, diversi saperi, come anche innumerevoli espressioni del genio umano. Tuttavia, dobbiamo riconoscere che non di rado la storia dell'umanità è stata segnata anche dall'egoismo e da azioni che hanno generato sofferenze e desolazione. Oggi l'umanità è chiamata a guardare a se stessa senza presunzione di assoluta superiorità. Infatti, con gli altri esseri viventi non solo condividiamo lo stesso pianeta e con alcuni addirittura lo stesso spazio vitale. Siamo sempre più consapevoli che la nostra vita dipende da molti altri organismi e che senza un ecosistema equilibrato rischiamo un collasso. Inoltre, sotto certi aspetti, abbiamo alcune affinità col mondo animale, anche se l'essere umano nasconde in sé caratteristiche che lo rendono radicalmente diverso dagli animali. Una prima dimensione è la nostra razionalità. Siamo capaci di un elevato grado di autocomprensione. Riflettiamo non solo su noi stessi, ma anche sugli altri e sull'universo che ci circonda. Sviluppiamo sofisticati strumenti tecnologici per migliorare le nostre condizioni di vita e salute ed elaboriamo mezzi e strutture socioculturali, geopolitiche ed economiche che incidono sul modo in cui viviamo, pensiamo e agiamo. Un'altra caratteristica unica è la coscienza morale, che ci permette di agire, distinguendo tra ciò che è bene e ciò che è male. Questo fondamentale riferimento fa sì che ci poniamo le domande etiche sul nostro agire, sulla società, sull'uso degli strumenti che sviluppiamo e rendiamo socialmente fruibili. Uno spiccato senso morale ci spinge a denunciare e intraprendere azioni che pongano fine alle ingiustizie attraverso azioni filantropiche e solidaristiche che contrastano la manifestazione del male. Anche il senso estetico ci caratterizza fortemente nel definire la nostra unicità come esseri umani. Non solo siamo in grado di contemplare la bellezza, ma la esprimiamo nelle molteplici forme artistiche, dalle più antiche come la pittura, scultura, musica o danza, fino alle più moderne come la fotografia, la cinematografia oppure l'arte digitale. Infine, scopriamo in noi l'esistenza di una dimensione più ineffabile, l'apertura all'orizzonte trascendente, che nella vita di molti di noi sfocia nell'esperienza religiosa, ma che ci spinge a interrogarci anche sulle domande ultime e sull'orizzonte che supera la mera dimensione terrestre. Gli antichi pensatori racchiudevano questa specificità e unicità dell'essere umano in un solo termine, humanitas, che da Cicerone in poi divenne la categoria con cui indicare il principio oggettivo di un complesso sistema di valori morali squisitamente umani. Ora, questa giornata suggella i 3 giorni ricchi di contenuti ed è anche il momento conclusivo di un complesso itinerario di riflessione durato alcuni anni. È però anche l'apertura verso una costante ricerca dell'humanitas condotta dai filosofi e dagli uomini di cultura del passato. Il mio augurio è perciò quello di continuare ad approfondire il mistero del nostro essere con entusiasmo e determinazione per scoprire e rimanere affascinati da ciò che ci rende veramente umani. Grazie.
Now Dr. Jane Goodall, founder of the Jane Goodall Institute and UN Messenger of Peace, shares her insights on what it means to be human.
When I went out to study chimpanzees, I hadn't been to college. I was just an animal lover from childhood. And Dr. Louis Leakey sent me out, and very soon I discovered so many similarities between the chimpanzees and ourselves in many areas. And I was absolutely shocked when 2 years later I got to Cambridge University in the UK and was told the difference between us and other animals is one of kind. That was in the early 60s. And I was told I couldn't talk about chimpanzee personality, mind, or emotion because those were qualities unique to us. Fortunately, I learned that that was wrong from my dog when I was a child, and I was able to stand up to the professors. And I think it's just because chimpanzees are so like us that we can stand back and say, yes, they're so like us, but we are different, and ask ourselves what that difference is. I think where we fit into the picture of primates is we are the fifth great ape. And our closest relative among the other great apes, well, there's two of them actually, the chimpanzee and the bonobo, and we differ from each other genetically by only just over 1%. So that puts us very clearly into biologically amongst the other great apes. But then, I ended off at the beginning by saying, you can step back then and say, yes, but we're different. And a lot of this has been said already. I mean, chimpanzees can be taught sign language. They can learn to use a computer. From this, we've been able to tell something about the way their minds work. But even the brightest chimpanzee, and some of them can learn up to 600 signs and communicate with each other as well as their teacher. They can paint, and they'll tell you what they've painted. And it's interesting to see how their minds differ, though. One chimpanzee, 4 years old, loved to make drawings. She'd been taught sign language, and she was asked to do a drawing. She usually filled up the page with circles. And on this occasion, she just drew like that and handed the paper back. So her teacher said, please finish. And the chimpanzee looked at it and handed it back and signed finished. So the teacher then said, what is it? And the chimpanzee signed back, ball, a ball. What has she done? She's drawn the bounce of a ball. And that to me is absolutely a fascinating glimpse into their minds. But during our evolution, we learned a language which enabled us to communicate with words. And although chimpanzees can be taught words, they haven't developed that ability. They communicate with rich variety of postures and gestures, which we use too. We share those ways of communication. But this sudden development of the use of words, it enables us to teach children about things that aren't present. And it enables us to make plans for the distant future. Chimpanzees can plan, let's go hunting now. They look at each other, they touch each other, and they set off on a hunt. But we can sit down and make a plan for 10 years' time. We could, with the use of words and language, we developed writing. And I think this triggered this explosive development of the intellect, which has led to our ability to do all these things that was talked about earlier, to develop telescopes and binoculars, to develop rockets that go up to Mars, from which a little robot crawls to take photos of the red planet, the surface of the red planet. But then when you realize how like us chimpanzees are, and yet how we differ with this explosive development of the intellect, this development of the intellect has not given us a reason to label ourselves as Homo sapiens, the wise ape. We're not wise. We've seen what Mars looks like. We don't want to live there. We've only got this one planet, at least in our lifetimes, and we're destroying it. So it's an extraordinary difference that we've become extremely intellectual, and we've lost the wisdom of living in our environment in a sustainable way. All the major religions share the golden rule: do to others as you would have them do to you. And if we can apply that to animals as well as to each other, then I think we shall be coming closer to being able to define ourselves as Homo sapiens.
Rabbi Dr. Eli Abadi, Reverend Terence Ehrman, and Sheikh Dr. Asim Youssef will discuss our understanding of humanity and compassion toward one another.
Well, we have to understand that as human beings, we are all equal in the eyes of God. We were all created from the same person. We are the descendant of the same person that we believe Adam was the first human being. And therefore, there is really no differences in humanity between us and anybody else. The understanding that we are all brothers in humanity, that should give us the understanding and the compassion to feel that feeling of compassion towards another human being who is really actually like our brother. In fact, we have a famous incident brought in the Talmud where a Gentile came to Rabbi Akiva, and asked him, I would like to learn the Bible standing on one foot. And Rabbi Akiva told him very easily, love your neighbor as yourself. The rest is all interpretation of that.
I think this is something that is really crucial and is of central import, actually, in terms of human beings as the vicegerents of the world, how human beings interact with the rest of creation. Islam has a discourse about rights and responsibilities, which is universal. That is to say, not our rights and responsibilities to our tribe, our nation, our clan, our brethren in faith, but rather universal rights. Rights that apply to all human beings. Rights that apply to animals. Rights that apply to plants. And this is based on the notion that every living thing is responding to God in some way.
Care for creation then flows from this, that we have a kinship with all of creation. We're all creatures, from the dragonfly to plants to animals to oxygen and water and mountains. We're all creatures of God. We're all part of God's household in a sense. Now, the science that studies this household is called ecology. It comes from two Greek words, oikos, which means a house or a household, and logos, which is that word that we just saw in John's gospel, this reason, understanding, logic, right? The study of, the logic of. So ecology is the logic of the household. It's the logic of the biosphere, of everything that's created and all inanimate things. There's an integrity to creation. There's a way for it to be. And if we're going to respect creation, we have to respect it in accord with that logic with which it's created.
Whether that commonality is at the level of religion, the level of the human, or the level that we are all fundamentally creatures of God. We are all fundamentally part of the family of creation.
We all live in a global village. And the more technology gets advanced, the more closer that village is. So we are all neighbors, no matter how far we are on the planet Earth. It is only if we learn not just to be tolerant of each other, but to accept each other, to be willing to help each other, to live together in peace, coexistence, and harmony, then the future is much, much brighter than the past, certainly than the past, but also than the present.
Please welcome Reverend Monsignor Dario Eduardo Vigano, Vice-Chancellor of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences and Pontifical Council of Social Sciences.
Mettere al centro della nostra riflessione il concetto di antropocene significa riflettere su come la responsabilità dell'uomo possa ancora oggi rimodellare e plasmare la creazione e il mondo. Certo, siamo debitori a Stoppani prima e a Crutzen e a Stürmer poi che ce ne hanno coniato il concetto, ma qui il concetto di antropocene che ci consegna l'ambito della geologia occorre dilatarlo per capire come evitare di stravolgere equilibri e dinamiche di interi ecosistemi che precludono la sopravvivenza a intere specie, compreso l'uomo. Alcune delle radici che nutrono oggi il concetto sono di natura antropologica e morale. Il modo in cui gli esseri umani interagiscono con l'ambiente toccano stili e comportamenti che influiscono sul benessere e sulla qualità della vita di tutti. Ed è per questo che dalle scienze ambientali alle scienze della salute tutte colgono un legame profondo, inscindibile, tra lo stato dell'habitat in cui viviamo e la nostra condizione psicofisica. Nella vita di ogni individuo esporsi ai diversi fattori dell'ambiente circostante può assumere espressioni differenti, traducendosi in stati di salute e benessere nei contesti ambientali ottimali oppure di disagio e di malattia per la presenza di elementi inquinanti. Si tratta di scelte personali che poi si strutturano nell'ambito sociale, in quello politico, attraverso la cultura che li nutre. Le ricerche epidemiologiche descrivono e interpretano i danni da esposizione ai fattori patogeni e alle sostanze inquinando, mettendo in evidenza che le ricadute non solo danneggiano la salute, ma possono essere letali a secondo della durata e della intensità di esposizioni nocive. La crescente sensibilità al rapporto tra la salute e l'ambiente fa sì che sono sempre più numerose le istituzioni e i centri di ricerca specializzati nel monitorare questo particolare aspetto, tanto da fornire alcuni importanti riferimenti sulla rilevanza globale del problema. Ad esempio, i dati disponibili dell'Organizzazione Mondiale della Sanità ci fanno riflettere su un dato che è particolarmente allarmante. Pensate, oltre il 24% delle cause di decesso nel mondo, quindi stiamo parlando quasi di 14 milioni di persone, muoiono a causa dell'ambiente malsano. Studi simili che riguardano le malattie e le disabilità confermano, per esempio, che nel 2030 la broncopneumatopatia cronica ostruttiva diventerà la terza causa di morte a livello mondiale. Ovviamente molte patologie sono dovute all'eccessiva presenza di elementi patogeni o di agenti inquinanti. Infatti di solito parliamo di molti tipi di inquinamento, applicando questo concetto anche ai fenomeni come ad esempio ad un eccessivo rumore circostante. Tuttavia si rende necessario il riferimento al concetto di inquinamento inteso nella sua cornice globale. Tra qualche giorno, e precisamente il 24 maggio, ricorre il 6° anno della pubblicazione della lettera enciclica Laudato Si di Papa Francesco, lettera sulla cura della casa comune. Questo documento del Papa, che tratta i temi ambientali dal punto di vista teologico e pastorale, è un documento a cui non è sfuggita l'interazione tra l'ambiente e la salute. E in particolare in 2 paragrafi Papa Francesco inquadra la complessità del problema sottolineando che l'inquinamento ambientale tocca la vita di milioni di persone, mentre la risposta agli agenti patogeni e inquinanti non può limitarsi solamente alle tecnologie. Cito questo primo paragrafo. Esistono forme di inquinamento che colpiscono quotidianamente le persone. L'esposizione agli inquinamenti atmosferici produce un ampio spettro di effetti sulla salute, in particolare dei più poveri, e producono milioni di morti premature. Ci si ammala, ad esempio, a causa di inalazioni di elevate quantità di fumo prodotto da combustibili utilizzati per cucinare o per riscaldarsi. A questo, dice il Papa, si aggiunge l'inquinamento che colpisce tutti, causato dal trasporto, dai fumi dell'industria, dalle discariche di sostanze che contribuiscono all'acidificazione del suolo e dell'acqua, da fertilizzanti, insetticidi, pesticidi, diserbanti in generale. La tecnologia, dice il Papa, che legata alla finanza pretende di essere l'unica soluzione dei problemi, di fatto non è in grado di vedere il mistero delle molteplici relazioni che esistono tra le cose e per questo a volte risolve un problema creandone altri. Ecco, allo stesso tempo Papa Francesco evidenzia il fatto che lo stato di inquinamento è fortemente legato a un comportamento umano disequilibrato, che genera noncuranza verso la casa comune del pianeta e rischia di diventare, d'appunto, una discarica. Ancora nella sua enciclica Papa Francesco scrive: c'è da considerare anche l'inquinamento prodotto dai rifiuti, compresi quelli pericolosi presenti in diversi ambienti. Si producono centinaia di milioni di tonnellate di rifiuti l'anno, molti dei quali, prosegue il Papa, non biodegradabili. Rifiuti domestici e commerciali, detriti di demolizioni, rifiuti clinici o elettronici o industriali, rifiuti altamente tossici e radioattivi. La terra, la nostra casa, sembra trasformarsi sempre più in un immenso deposito di immondizia. In molti luoghi del pianeta gli anziani ricordano con nostalgia i paesaggi di altri tempi, che ora appaiono sommersi da spazzatura. Tanto i rifiuti industriali quanto i prodotti chimici utilizzati nelle città e nei campi possono produrre un effetto di bioaccumulazione negli organismi degli abitanti delle zone limitrofe, che si verifica anche quando il livello di presenza di un elemento tossico in un luogo è basso. Il Papa prosegue dicendo: molte volte si prendono misure solo quando si sono prodotti effetti irreversibili per la salute delle persone. Ecco, troppe volte siamo in ritardo. Dunque oggi, per poter assicurare le condizioni ottimali di salute, è fondamentale prendersi cura dell'ambiente. La cura, possiamo dire, è diventata una forma di amore e include un approccio olistico. E anzitutto cura di se stessi, cura del rapporto con gli altri, cura del rapporto con Dio, se vogliamo che la cura dell'ambiente abbia un equilibrio. L'insegnamento della Chiesa Cattolica in questo senso sollecita, invita le coscienze dei credenti perché riscoprano se stessi come custodi del creato, capaci di gestire i doni del Creatore senza vivere invece come predatori delle risorse. Questa consapevolezza sta alla base di un agire responsabile non solo verso l'umanità, ma verso ogni essere vivente, come tratto identitario di ogni essere relazionale. Tutelare l'equilibrio ecologico non solo giova alla nostra salute e al nostro benessere, ma esprime anche la convinzione che, come dice il Papa, tutto nel mondo è intimamente connesso.
Ray Dalio, founder and co-chairman and co-investment officer of Bridgewater Associates, sits down for an interview with Robin Roberts, co-anchor of Good Morning America on ABC.
Ray, it is so good to spend this time with you and really appreciate all that you do. And I want people to know, word on the street, whether, it doesn't matter what walk of life, you treat everybody the same. And we appreciate that very much. For people who don't know you, just give them a little background on yourself, Ray.
Well, I grew up, my dad was a musician, a jazz musician. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. I grew up in a lower middle class family. I went to a public school. I had adequate food, I had adequate health care, and I came out to a world of equal opportunity. And that's all I needed. You know, at 12, I did odd jobs and I collected, I mowed lawns and I caddied and did that things. I put my money in the markets when I was a kid, when I was 12. And I bought a company that only stock I ever heard of that was less than $5 a share, was about to go bankrupt, but somebody acquired it. I was lucky and it tripled and I got hooked.
Hooked.
I got hooked on the market. And so that was my game. I loved the game and I played it.
You're good at it. Can I just say that? I mean, the largest hedge fund, Bridgewater. So you're a very humble man. So I'm just gonna let people know what you have been able to create. And what's so wonderful about you, Ray, is that you talk about your humble upbringing and you said you had enough and that you see with your eyes that that's not the case, especially when it comes to healthcare. And you've done something with that. You've been extremely philanthropic, extremely generous, especially with New York Presbyterian Hospital, establishing a center there that you really wanted to address racial and ethnic disparities in healthcare. What have you learned about the opportunities to be able to bridge that gap, Ray?
Well, we've done the same in education and food security. And it's education, assuring the basics of education, food security, and healthcare to the poorest, most stretched populations is a very important thing to my wife and I. And so we've done that in many, many different ways. I won't get into it, all of them because we won't have time. But in the Health Justice Center, which we created with New York Presbyterian Hospital, there are so many different ways in poor neighborhoods that conditions are so much different. There's also different genetics for the populations, things like diabetes and so on, and food care. So we've done a lot there. We've in education, we've taken on what we try to get high school students who would be dropping out or are out of the system through the system, and to try to have healthcare. So we've done a lot of things. We bought computers, 60,000 computers for kids who, when we found out that education was going to stop and it had to be online, they needed computers and so on. So we're just generally, we're trying to have our impact a bit. Now, the problems are so enormous and it's so unfair. We're just trying to lift those up a little bit to the extent we can do that, because, in a sense, I relate to them, and I think that it's just so terrible that our society does not establish a bottom, a floor of which people should not be allowed to go, particularly children. I could tell you at length about the crime environments that they have to put up. To be successful in these communities is very difficult. So we're affected by that. We do a lot, microfinance to help them have jobs. Anyway, a lot.
A lot,
But so little. But so little.
You see, but if more of us were to do, this is what this conference is about. So people can see that we're coming together, and it's everybody doing their part. So yes, you're dealing with the healthcare issues, but also because we've had a conversation or two, the environment is very, very important to you and to your family. The oceans, where does that love come from, and being so passionate about marine life and the ocean?
Well, in my 20s, I started to learn how to dive, and then nature has always had a big effect on me. I feel better in nature. I admire nature. I think we're all part of nature. And that brought me into the ocean. And then I got excited about the ocean, and I realized it's our greatest asset. If you look at the ocean, that's like a sheet. And on all the land above the ocean is about only 1/3 of the space beneath the surface of the ocean, and it's unexplored. And it's so important it is the biggest environmental thing we have. It's our biggest asset. It's not explored, and it's very important in terms of the whole ecology. I believe that nature is very much part of our community. We're part of nature in that whole cycle. So it thrills me to support explorers and scientists who are going down there, and then to bring that up. And so to do that, I've created a fabulous research ship and media, which is pursued by, is used by those scientists. And we're going to be bringing it through National Geographic and Disney to the public, so individuals will be able to experience that the same way Jacques Cousteau brought it. And kids, even in schools, nowadays with remotes, can control the devices that are down in the ocean, 6,000 meters. So I'm very excited about helping not only to protect it, but to excite others with it. That's one of the things I'm excited about.
I can just see you light up when you're talking about this. And you know what? It's something, this past year, because of the pandemic, there's no silver lining to what we've gone through with the loss of life. We have seen, though, marine life. If people notice, the oceans are cleaner. What we learn? What lessons can we learn from this past year, and how we learn?
I think there's intellectual learning, and then I think there's visceral learning. And I think you could then say that you can change and create a better environment and all of that. I don't think that has much impact. When you fall in love with it, when you see it and you're excited by it, in a sense, you get to see it directly, and then you're emotionally engaged in it. And then you will understand the consequences. It's like, I guess smoking and then being able to see a section of the lung or something. To be able to see what you're talking about and to see the life and realize that we're connected to the life. We're as much dependent on the ocean as the ocean is dependent on us, more so. So that's what I'm excited about doing. Yes, intellectually, you can take the numbers, the species that are being lost, and then we can go on at length in terms of what that means for the environment, the air quality, what it means for our consumption, what it means in so many different climate, what the impact that the ocean has on climate and what impact that has on our lives in so many different ways. We can rattle those things off, but unless we feel it and care about it, I don't think it's going to make much difference.
You've been a wonderful author, and I understand that you also have a new book that is coming out, and I'm very excited about it. And it's called The Changing World Order: Why Nations Succeed or Fail. You argue the future will be radically different. Now, what I want to ask you, is that good or is that bad? When you're talking about it's going to be radically different in the future.
Well, the forces, there are three main forces. There's a large wealth values gap and political gap that is raising the risks of a civil war. I went back and I studied history over the last 5 years, and these patterns happen all along. There is a conflict that's brewing internally. There's the rise of a great power, China, to be comparable. That's an issue. And then there's a financial issue in terms of the creation of lots of debt and printing a lot of money devalues the money. And when you lose the financial benefit at the same time as people are at each other's throats, and then you have international challenges, that confluence of events is a very, very threatening confluence of events. That's also one of the reasons I'm excited about this conference, because when we get back to what is it that we need to do to make our future good? Well, it is largely being good with each other. In other words, it's not fighting. It is understanding that the conflict that we're seeing internally and externally, and the difficulties we face, financial difficulties, as well as environmental difficulties such as the pandemic and so on. If we approach that with love and harmony, to be able to say it's a common problem rather than fight over it, that is our only chance of having a good outcome.
And what makes you hopeful about the future? That is
man's capacity to adapt. Man's the inventiveness. This has been out through history. Man's is a unique species in being able to invent and adapt. And that's really the greatest force in the universe. So if we can be together and we can adapt well together, we have a bright future. There is enough resources to go around. The amount of resources in the world are at an all-time peak. And if we can do that together in a together way with that adaptation, that is a great potential that we have. And if we don't, we're going to go through a decade of hell. So that's our choice, I think.
It's our choice. We're not going to let that happen. Not on our watch, right, Ray? Not on our watch.
We'll do our best.
We always do. And thank you. And it just shows the creativity. Normally we would be all together in Rome for this conference, but we find a way to be creative. And I think when there are when people are uncertain, that just means there are endless possibilities. Uncertainty leads to endless possibilities. And thank you for making so much possible for so many people, Ray Dalio.
Well, thank you, Robin.
Mark Benioff, the chair and CEO of Salesforce.com, shares his vision for creating a better world for all stakeholders in this conversation with Robin Roberts, co-anchor of Good Morning America on ABC.
I have been looking forward to this. Salesforce co-founder, chair, CEO, Mark Benioff, who believes that the business of business is to make a difference, to make an impact in the world. And boy, has he done just that. And I'm very proud to say a dear friend. How are you, Mark?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful, Robin. And it's such a pleasure to be with you. And I was just thinking about how sad I was that we haven't had dinner together in a long time.
Folks need to know those dinners that you would host, there'd be like 20 or so, but it was so intimate and people from all walks of life. And that's what you are about. You're so inclusive. But let's get right into how you really believe that business is in business to make an impact in the world. Where does that philosophy stem from?
Well, I've had so much fun over the last 22 years since I started Salesforce to today, growing it to 60,000 employees and over $200 billion in market cap and more than 25 billion in revenue this year. And, these are big numbers. And I'll tell you, the reason I've had so much fun is because I really believe business is the greatest platform for change. And because of that, Robin, I was delivering not only a great shareholder return, which is, our shareholders have done fantastic, but I've delivered a great stakeholder return as well. I believe that you have to manage for stakeholders and shareholders. And that means that I've been able to deliver $120 million right here to our local San Francisco public schools, over $300 million in grants total so far. We run 50,000 nonprofits and NGOs on our platform for free every year. That's $1 billion of software that we're delivering every year to them. And also that we've done 5 million hours of volunteerism. I mean, that to me is fun. And those two things, a great shareholder return and a great stakeholder return, well, putting those together, that to me is, really evidence that you can do well and do good.
Well, just what you said, that category there, because you co-founded Salesforce in 1999, and you had this vision that you were going to give away 1% of your equity, 1% of your workforce being involved and in the community. How has that impacted communities, not just there in the Bay Area, but around the world?
Well, you're exactly right. Wherever we do business, we bring our 1-1-1 model, which is when we started Salesforce, we had kind of three ideas: a new technology model, which we call the cloud, a new business model, which is subscriptions, but this new philanthropy model that we built in, this 1% of our equities. So we've been able to give away hundreds of millions of dollars, 1% of all of our technology, 1% of all of our employees' time. That's the 5 million hours. And that has been very exciting. And wherever we go, our employees know that their responsibility is to give back, to do well in their communities. And where we see issues, whether it's here in San Francisco with homelessness, or whether even if it's in New York with the local, public education system, wherever we can do good, we're going to get involved and we're going to make an impact. Yes, we're going to run our business, but we can also use our resources. I mean, even today, I have to tell you that what I'm working on right now is relief efforts for India. And I'm so excited because we now have 2 large aircraft, A330s, leaving from Shanghai on their way to Delhi with oxygen concentrators and pulse oximeters and all the things that are needed right now in the relief effort. And that's our first 2 planes, and I hope we're going to have a lot more. And what's been fun for me is my friends know already that I'm doing that, and so they proactively come to me. And so other companies are actually now starting to partner with us so we can do even more. And that idea that, you know, we can all work together, that we can work to improve the state of the world using our business resources, that is what makes business fun for me.
Those planes are on their way to India. And let me tell you, my friend, thank you for the plane that you sent here to New York very early on in the pandemic when we were in dire need of supplies. And we saw that big Salesforce plane and really got the ball moving. And you're right, more people got involved. And so I thank you for that. I really do. Let's talk about climate change, because there's so much that you are so passionate about. What do you think is a number one issue facing the planet today?
Well, you just said it, climate change. And we know that we've released 200 gigatons of carbon into the atmosphere since the first industrial revolution. Now, that part of that is our emissions. Part of that is that we've deforested. You know, we used to have 6 trillion trees on our planet, and now we have 3 trillion. And for every trillion trees that we chop down or burn or get rid of, we lose 200 gigatons of storage capability. That is, they're banking carbon. And so these carbon banks are very important. So as we've moved from 6 trillion trees to 3 trillion trees, and as we've emitted more, well, we have now more emissions and less sequestration capability. It's not a good combination. And that's why the world is getting hotter. So what we need to do is we need to emit less, number one. But number two is we need to build more sequestration capability. And that really comes, number one, best sequestration technology in the world, Robin, is the tree. And so that's why I started 1T.org, 1 Trillion Trees, now over a year ago, in partnership with the World Economic Forum in Geneva. And it's been a huge success. We have almost 100 billion trees now committed. And this is something that we can all do. We can all plant a tree, and it makes a lot of sense because that is our best carbon storage, and it's going to help our environment.
Thank you for saying that, because folks feel like, oh, it's so enormous, which it is, but something as simple as planting a tree can make
the best thing we can do. And our government, for example, we can inspire our government because the US government is the largest tree owner in the United States. They own more trees than anyone. And we can inspire other landowners like just, you know, me and you, and I'm looking right outside my window here. I have a tree, but there's landowners here in the United States who have lots of trees, and we can encourage them not to cut those trees down. And we can even find ways to pay them because, you know, Salesforce today is a net zero company. That is, we're a net zero emissions. Mm-hmm. And we want every company to become a net zero company. And one way that we do that is that we actually pay landowners to not cut down their trees. We also do, you know, we convert cook stoves to not emit as much in third world countries. We look to develop more mangroves. We do seagrasses. You know, we have green carbon, the trees. We have blue carbon, the oceans. We have brown carbon, the farms. And we have gray carbon. We have machines now that are sucking the carbon out of the environment. That's very exciting. I was on the phone last night with an entrepreneur in Switzerland who's built a company that's actually just sucking carbon out of the sky every day. That's incredible. You know, this idea that we can find new ways to mitigate what we're doing with these carbon outputs, and this idea that we can bring the carbon back in, this is critical for our future. But we've got to emit less, but we can also sequester more.
Thank you for saying that. That is something that people need to put at the forefront of their minds, not in the back of their minds, because it affects us all globally. I have to say, you know, Salesforce, you're one of the biggest companies on the planet. Yet you are still able, Mark, and this is a testament to you and your leadership, your core values. You don't stray from that. How can you reinforce that to people to know that you can still be big, you can still do what you're doing with Salesforce, but it doesn't mean that you have to compromise your core values?
Well, the number one thing all of us can do is just be mindful of what are our core values, what really matters to us. And at Salesforce, that's trust, the trust that we have with each other and our employees, our customers, the planet, and also we can really think about not just trust, but customer success, innovation, equality, sustainability. We know what our core values are. And what I really encourage all of us to do is really decide what are our core values. Because if you want to stay connected to your core values, number one decision is, hey, get a beginner's mind and say, what are my core values? And this can be so transformational and so exciting for everyone, because then we can do something, this is a business term, but we can operationalize our core values. How are we going to get trust, or how are we going to get sustainability? But the first decision is, what are those core values that are so important to us?
Yes, you have to identify what they are. With all that you are so involved in, and you give it all, whether it's like dealing with homelessness, whatever it is, that what is your strategic approach when you are dealing with so many different issues? But there has to be a strategic approach, I would think, that you take to each one. Is there a common thread that helps you?
There is. Personally, I just operate locally. I really look at what are the issues right here that are happening in my neighborhood, and everything from I've knocked on the door to my local public school and talked to my principal and said, hey, what can I do to make this school better? To what can I do to make this district better? To what can we deal with the homeless in San Francisco? How can we build new children's hospitals? That's local. But Salesforce is a global company. We have 60,000 employees. So I'm getting emails every day from my employees saying, hey, don't forget about us over here. Don't forget about us over here. And that gives me the opportunity to act locally, but through Salesforce. So that's really my strategy. And that's why India is on my mind today. I have to tell you, Robin, I mean, my heart is broken for what is going on for India. We have thousands of employees there. They're emailing me, texting me, telling me what's going on. The stories are sad. Reminds me a lot of what we went through a year ago in New York and in some of our major cities here in the United States. And I know that we have the resources, the relationships, the ideas, the capability to say, yes, we're going to do whatever we can to help and support. And a year ago, you're right, we did 60 million pieces of PPE to 300 hospitals. We landed planes at the peak at London and New York and Chicago and San Francisco and other cities. And now, India's on red alert. And what's on my mind is, what should we be doing, Salesforce, to help India? And that is, we came up with the idea, well, we can do what we were good at a year ago. We can get supplies to where it matters most. And I am surprised, honestly, that we're back at it, that we're kind of back in this. I thought it was behind us, but we're not. We're still in COVID, and the pandemic is still global, and things are better here in the United States, and things are better for me and you, but things are not better for everyone. So we have to stay on red alert, if you will. And our government does too. We should be telling our government to help, because they're launching planes. They have a lot of resource. All of us have to do our part.
All of us have to do our part, and all of us have to realize we have more in common than not. And if this past year did not teach us that, it was humbling for for the entire world. I mean, I can't, in my lifetime, there's been nothing that's ever, I could say, globally impacted us. And what is your final word for people? Give us a little pep talk. I mean, because when we see all that is going on in the world right now, and sometimes people feel like I believe in the good, just like you, Bart. I believe there's more good in people than not. So what do we do to get people in the game and know that each one of us can play a role?
Well, I think you said it, Robin. That is, none of us can do everything, but we can all do something. And I think if each of us does one thing, it can be a small thing, but if we do an action and say, yes, we're going to go forward together, and we're going to work to improve the state of the world, then we will. We can all make a decision. What is the one thing we can do today to make things just a little bit better? Obviously, I have more responsibility with a big company. I have to do more. I realize that. That's my responsibility. That's I love a Hawaiian term. It's called kuleana. Kuleana. It means responsibility in Hawaiian. It's like the personal responsibility that you carry inside yourself. In India, they might call it your karma, that this is my karma. I'm carrying my responsibility forward. But for each of us, we can knock on our door of our local public school. We can help the local homeless. We know that every homeless person needs a home. We know that we can volunteer at our local food bank, and we know that we can do something for others, even if it's just knocking on the door of somebody next door who may be lonely during the pandemic. So there's something for everybody to do. This is very important. We can all have a heart of service, and we can always be generous in our spirit. And that's what I really encourage everyone to do. And you're a great example of that, Robin. And thank you for everything that you do every single day. You're always giving me the motivation and the excitement and the energy to know that the world is getting better.
Thank you, Mark. I blow a heavenly kiss to my mother and my father every morning before I enter the studio, and just thank them for helping me understand to be of service to people. That's what it's all about. I'm blessed, you're blessed, but it's not just to be blessed, but to be a blessing. And you, my friend, are certainly that. As busy as you are to make time to be with us, I certainly do appreciate it. And what's that Hawaiian term that you used?
It's kuleana, your responsibility. And I know that you express that so beautifully every day, Robin.
Bless you. Mahalo.
Aloha. Love you. Bye. I hope to be at dinner with you soon.
I can't wait, Mark. Thank you.